Today I'm going to be making chocolate chip cookies from the Courier recipe book. The first one I'm going to try is the basic recipe. The first part of it says that we're going to sift together the flour, salt, and baking soda. First I have 1.5 cups of Pillsbury's Best all-purpose baking flour, and the all-purpose flours are better for crispier, darker cookies, is what Courier mentions in the book. So I'm going to sift together the 1.5 cups of flour, 3/4 tablespoon of salt, and I'm using sea salt for this, and 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. Okay, so for the next part of the recipe, I'm going to use an electric mixer to blend together my fat, which I've chosen to use Bluebonnet butter sticks, and I have 10 tablespoons of that. And I'm going to cream the fat with the 1 cup of C.H. cane sugar. And I'm going to use my mixer to cream these until light and fluffy. Okay, I'm now going to beat in 1 large grade A egg and 1 tablespoon. Okay, and next I'm going to add in 1 cup of semi-sweet chocolate chips, and for my recipe I am using Nestle Toll House chocolate chips. And I'm going to blend these in for 5 seconds on low. Okay, so now I have my oven preheating to 375 degrees Celsius, and I'm going to spray my cookie sheet with Pam Nonstick Original Cooking Oil. And I'm going to use this scoop to make about 1.5 inch cookie batters. So these are the cookies from my first batch, the basic recipe, and if you look at them, they're pretty thin and not very dark, and the edges of the ones that are on the bottom are pretty rugged, and they're very soft though, so I think that they turned out okay. The chips are not very melted though. Okay, so for the second part, I'm going to do the thin chocolate chip cookie recipe, and I'm going to mix together another 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and 3/4 teaspoon of salt. And I'm using Toned sea salt again, Pillsbury all-purpose flour, and Schnucks brand baking soda. For the next part of my recipe, I'm going to go ahead and cream together another 10 tablespoons of butter, as the recipe calls for, and the sugar into a large bowl until it gets to a light and fluffy point. Okay, so the reason why we added the corn syrup is because it'll help brown the cookies, and it'll make the surface of my cookies a little bit crispier, according to Courier. And then we also added in the eggs because eggs help hold things together, and the egg whites will help dry out the cookies. Now I'm going to add the 1 cup of chocolate chips to my thin cookie recipe, and then I'm going to place them out and put them in the oven. Okay, so last time I saw that my cookies seemed to be a little bit bigger than what I had wanted, so I'm going to use a small spoon and make smaller ones this time. making the puffed chocolate chip cookie recipe, and it's a little bit different. It calls for cake flour, 1.5 cups. So I'm using Swan's Down, and the reason why we use cake flour instead of all-purpose flour is it helps the water not soak up as much, so it's able to turn to steam in the oven better, and it's ideal for tender and fluffier cookies. And I'm going to sift that together with the 3/4 of the sea salt, and this time we're using baking powder instead of baking soda. Okay, and so now we're going to cream together 2 tablespoons of butter, and a different part of this recipe is that we're going to be using 9 tablespoons of Crisco butter flavored shortening. So I'm going to add that in, and we're also going to be using brown sugar, and the recipe calls for 1 cup minus 1 tablespoon, so I'm going to go ahead and add that. And then last, I'm going to go ahead and cream these together. Okay, now I'm going to beat in the vanilla extract and an egg. And for this recipe, I am changing it up, and I have mixed together 1/2 cup of chocolate chips from Toll House and 1/2 of white chocolate chips to see how that turns out. Okay, so I'm about to put the puffy version of the chocolate chip, well, 1/2 white chocolate chip, 1/2 chocolate chip cookies in the oven. I want to point out, if you want to take a closer look at the dough, is a lot fluffier than any of the others have been. So I'm going to go ahead and put these in for 12 minutes and see how it turns out. Okay, so these are my final batch of cookies, and they're the puffed recipe. If you look at them, the ones that were on the lower rack again burned a little bit on the bottom, even though we lowered the oven temperature by 25 degrees. And they're also very thin instead of puffy, and I'm not sure if that's from the brown sugar or what exactly, but they are, however, very tender, like the cake flour calls that it will be.